I'm not a man who talks much about his own business. Ask anyone in Holt's Bench, and they will tell you that Emmett Guard keeps his affairs to himself, does what needs doing, and does not make a show of anything. They will tell you he has been that way since his wife died 7 years back, and they will probably add, if they feel bold enough, that he has been that way since before that. I don't argue the point. A man's reputation is mostly accurate whether he likes it or not. So when I tell you that I went to Cora Vane's door in the first week of October with a business proposition and a folded piece of paper, understand that I had thought it through for 3 weeks before I moved. I do not knock on widows' doors without good reason. I do not make offers I haven't costed out. And I am not in the habit of putting myself in situations I cannot back out of cleanly. This one, as it turned out, I could not back out of at all. But I didn't know that when I climbed down from my horse that Tuesday morning, straightened my hat, and knocked. The land grant condition was in writing, which was the only reason I took it seriously. The county clerk, a fidgety man named Orville Pratt, had read it to me twice before I believed him. The Crail Valley Homestead Compact of 1871, signed by my father and 11 other men who thought they were building something permanent, required that any parcel over 600 acres be held by a settled household. Defined, in the language of the compact, as a man with a lawful wife and the evidence of a family in residence. My father had met that condition easily. My wife, Margaret, had met it with me for 18 years. Margaret died in the spring of 1876, and Orville Pratt came to see me in the September of 1883 to inform me that the compact's trustees had spent 2 years debating whether a widower living alone on 800 acres qualified as a settled household, and that they had decided, regretfully, that he did not, and that I had until the 1st of April to either resolve the matter or accept a forced partition of the north pasture at a price they would set, not me. I thanked Orville and showed him out and stood on my porch for a long time looking at the north pasture. It was good land. My father had broken it. I had expanded it. Margaret had planted a kitchen garden along its eastern edge every spring for 18 years, and the rhubarb she put in during our 2nd year was still coming back. I was not going to let a county trustee cut it off and sell it to the Harker operation, which was the likely buyer, and a thing I would not allow if I had any say. So I thought for 3 weeks, and then I rode to the Vane cabin on the south end of town. I knew Cora Vane the way a man in a small valley knows most people. By sight, by reputation, by the small square of public business she conducted at the dry goods store and the post office. Her husband, Tom Vane, had died 14 months prior, a fever that took him fast, before anyone could do much. He'd left behind a cabin, a laundress operation she ran from 2 tubs behind the house, 2 daughters aged 7 and 9, and debts that Holt's Bench had been quietly aware of since his funeral. The bank's position on the Vane cabin was also known. Cyrus Drum at First Territorial was not a cruel man, but he was a precise one, and the note Tom had signed was past due in a way that Cora's laundress income couldn't touch. 3 weeks, maybe 4. That was the common estimate. I had looked at this information the way I looked at any problem, practically without sentiment. Cora Vane needed something. I needed something. The things we needed did not overlap in any romantic fashion, but they overlapped in the only fashion that matters when a man is standing in October trying to save 800 acres, and a woman is standing in October trying to save the roof over her daughters' heads. I knocked. She answered in a canvas apron with her sleeves rolled to the elbow and her hair pulled back, and a look on her face that said she was not expecting company and did not particularly welcome it. She was a square-shouldered woman, steady in the way of people who have had a hard year, and decided not to be flattened by it. "Mr. Guard," she said. "Mrs. Vane." I took off my hat. "I have a business matter I'd like to discuss with you if you have a few minutes." She considered me for a moment. Not warmly, but not rudely. The considering look of a woman who had learned to assess things quickly and correctly. "Come in then," she said. I laid it out the way I would lay out any contract. The compact's condition, the deadline, the north pasture, what I needed from her, what I was prepared to offer her in return. I had written the terms on paper because written terms are clearer than spoken ones, and because I did not want there to be any misunderstanding about what I was and was not proposing. She read the paper twice, then she set it on the table and looked at me. "You're proposing a legal marriage," she said. "A lawful one," I said. "On paper, I have no other expectations. My house is large enough that you and your daughters would have your own rooms. The cabin here would be surrendered to the bank in settlement of the note. I'd see to the negotiation. The north pasture stays intact. You have a roof and a stable situation. Your daughters go to the school in town. In the spring, if you want to resume the laundress work, there's a building on the south side of my property that could be fitted for it." She was quiet for a moment. "And when the compact condition is satisfied," she said, "a year will do it, maybe 2 to be safe. After that, the situation is whatever we agree it to be." She looked at the paper again. "You've thought about this carefully," she said. 3 weeks, I said. Something crossed her face that might have been the edge of rye. "I've had 14 months, she said. "And I haven't come up with anything better." She picked up the paper and folded it the way I had brought it. "I have 2 conditions," she said. "My girls are not to be confused about what this is. They're old enough to know something has changed and young enough to be hurt by it if it's handled wrong. I'll speak to them myself, in my own way." "That's your business," I said. "Second condition." She looked at me levelly. "If this is going to be a business arrangement, it runs like one. Clear terms, no ambiguity. If something needs to change, we say so directly." "Agreed," I said. "Then I'll consider it," she said. "I'll send word by Thursday." I put my hat back on and stood up and nodded to her. She walked me to the door the way a person sees out a solicitor, not a suitor. I respected that. I got on my horse and rode back to the guard place and did not let myself think about it until Thursday, when her note arrived. "I accept the terms, CV." We were married at the county clerk's office on the 14th of October, with Orville Pratt as witness, a thing he seemed to find deeply interesting and was too professional to say so. Cora wore a dark blue dress that was practical and tidy. I wore my good jacket. There were no flowers. We signed where Orville indicated and shook hands in the doorway and drove back to the guard place in my wagon with her 2 trunks and 3 crates in the bed, and her daughters sitting very straight on the bench between us. The older one was named Willa. 9 years old, her mother's square shoulders already forming, a watchful quality to her that I recognized as the careful attention of a child who has learned that situations change without warning. The younger one was June, 7. And the opposite of watchful, she absorbed the world directly, without the buffer of caution, and had apparently decided within the first mile of the drive that the wagon was acceptable and that I was worth examining. "Is that your horse?" she asked, nodding at the bay gelding tied to the tailgate. "That's Combe," I said. "Does he bite?" "Only if you're rude to him." June considered this seriously. "I'm not rude," she said. "Then you'll get along fine." Willa said nothing, but I noticed her watching the exchange with the focused attention of someone filing things away. Cora was looking at the road ahead. She had the look of a person managing the distance between where she was and where she had expected to be, and doing it quietly. I understood that look. I had lived inside it for 7 years. The guardhouse was a long, 2-story timber house that my father had built well, and that I had kept up because I did not know how not to. It had stood empty of warmth for 7 years, by which I mean there had been heat and food and the physical maintenance of a house, but not what makes a house something other than shelter. I had been living in the functional shell of it and had stopped noticing. Cora walked through it without comment, which I appreciated. She noted rooms, noted windows, noted the kitchen's layout with the efficient eye of a woman who would need to work in it. She asked one practical question about the water source. A good spring-fed line my father had engineered, still reliable, and one about the condition of the roof over the east wing, where the girls would sleep. Both good questions. I showed the girls their room. June went directly to the window and looked out at the barn and announced that she could see home from there. Willa stood in the center of the room and looked at it carefully, and then looked at me. "Thank you, Mr. Guard," she said. "Emmett," I said, "if it's easier." She thought about it. "Thank you, Emmett," she said, in the tone of a child who is being precise. I showed Cora her room across the hall from the girls on the second floor, away from my room at the east end. She had not asked for this arrangement, and I had not offered it as a courtesy point. It was simply the sensible organization of the house. She put her hand on the doorframe, looked into the room, and said, "This will do well." That was the end of the first day. The first 2 weeks were an exercise in the management of a shared space by two people who were accustomed to managing alone. Cora ran the kitchen from the second morning without discussion. She was a methodical cook, nothing elaborate but nothing wasted, and she had the kitchen organized to her satisfaction within a week in a way that was different from how I had organized it, but not wrong. I did not say anything about it. She did not explain it. The meals appeared at regular hours and were good, and I said so once directly, and she nodded once directly, and that was the entire conversation about cooking for the first month. I managed the stock and the property as I always had. I was up before light and working until past dark most days, which meant our paths crossed at meals, and occasionally in the early evening when I came in from the last round of the barn. The girls ate with us at every meal. June talked. Willa ate carefully and listened and occasionally spoke in the measured way that was becoming familiar to me as her particular style. Cora kept the table conversation moving in a quiet, directed way that I suspected took more effort than it appeared. After 3 days, I noticed that Cora had begun leaving coffee on the stove in a pot that stayed warm when I came in from the early round. She did not mention it. I did not mention it. I drank the coffee and went about my morning. After a week, I began making sure the porch was cleared of snow before she and the girls came down, which required getting up 15 minutes earlier than I had been. I did not mention this either. These were not agreements, they were adjustments. The slow, wordless modification of a routine to account for other people in it. I noticed I was doing it. I did not examine why. The first genuine difficulty arrived in the 3rd week, in the form of Holt's Bench's opinion. A valley of 300 people does not miss a change. Our marriage had been noted, discussed, and assessed in the 2 weeks since Orville Pratt's well-intentioned observation at the feed store that Emmett Guard had finally seen sense and taken a wife. The general opinion seemed to be cautiously approving, with the usual small current of speculation underneath. Why a woman like Cora Vane would accept such an arrangement, what Emmett Guard had offered to make it worth her while, whether it was really as businesslike as it looked. None of this reached me directly, because people in Holt's Bench had learned over 7 years that I was not interested in their opinions about my life, and they were better off not offering them. It reached Cora, because a valley of 300 people reserves a different level of commentary for women. She told me about it on a Thursday evening in the kitchen after the girls were in bed. She did not complain, and she did not seem distressed. She reported it the way she had said she would, directly, because it was information that affected the terms of the arrangement. "Martha Holt said something to me at the store today," she said. "The substance of it was that she considers this situation irregular and is concerned about what example it sets." She paused. She was not unkind about it, but she was clear. "Martha Holt has concerned herself with other people's irregularities for 60 years, I said. "She's good at it." Cora looked at me steadily. She asked me if I was content. I looked up from the harness I was mending at the kitchen table. "What did you tell her?" "I told her I was," Cora said, Because I am, practically speaking. She watched me for a moment. I wanted you to know it had been said because if more people ask, my answer will be the same and you should know what I'm saying. I nodded. Appreciated, I said. She poured herself a cup of the evening coffee and sat down at the table across from me. We sat in silence for a while, which was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people who have learned not to fill space with noise for its own sake. Is there anything that concerns you about the arrangement? She said, not as a challenge, as the practical inventory she had promised at the start. I thought about it honestly. The north pasture is safe, I said. The girls seem settled, the house runs well. I paused. No concerns. Good, she said. She finished her coffee and said good night and went upstairs. I sat there for a while longer, aware of something I couldn't name exactly. The house felt different. Not smaller the way I might have expected with 4 people in it. Larger than it had been. Like a room when a window is opened, more air in it, not less. I didn't examine that either. I went to bed. November came in hard, which it does in the Crail Range, and the work shifted from the open range to the close work of a winter operation, feed distribution, the stock barn, the woodpile that had to be maintained at a level that would carry us through to March. I was used to doing this alone. Having Cora and the girls change the geometry of it. Willa, it turned out, was serious about useful work. By the second week of November, she had established a routine of feeding the chickens each morning before school with a precision that impressed me and would have impressed my father. She asked me once, with the careful Willa precision, whether she was doing it right, and I told her she was doing it the way it needed to be done, which I could see satisfied her in a fundamental way. June was not serious about useful work in the same way but was curious about all of it, which was a different quality and not a lesser one. She wanted to know why the hay was stacked the particular way I stacked it, why Combe needed his feet checked after a hard ride, why the ice on the water trough had to be broken at exactly that depth and not more. I answered because the questions were good ones, and because the habit of silence I had built over 7 years was, I was finding, not as fixed as I had believed it to be. One evening in mid-November, I came in to find Cora at the kitchen table with both girls, a lamp lit against the early dark. All 3 of them bent over what turned out to be a map June had drawn of the property, rough, creditable, with the barn and the house and Comb's paddock marked in June's round hand, and a careful X where June had decided the best snow was. I stood in the doorway and looked at it. The spring is in the wrong place, I said. June looked up at me, unbothered. Where should it be? I came to the table and looked at the map and pointed. June made a correction with absolute confidence. Willa watched me with the filing away expression. Cora had a look on her face I hadn't seen before. A relaxed look. The particular relaxation of a person who has let their guard down a degree without deciding to. Can I keep it? June said, meaning the map. It's yours, I said. I hung up my coat and washed my hands at the basin and sat down at the table, and Cora poured coffee without being asked, and we stayed there until the girls went up, the 4 of us in the circle of lamplight, and I thought, this is what the house was missing. Not warmth, exactly. Occupancy. The specific weight of people who belong somewhere. I did not say any of that. I drank my coffee, but I thought it. The first time I understood that the arrangement had become something other than the arrangement was a Sunday in late November, and it was a small thing. I had driven into Holt's Bench for the week's supplies and come back to find the girls in the snow yard, Willa moving with measured purpose and June in a kind of mobile chaos that somehow resulted in a serviceable snowman on the south side of the porch. Cora was watching from the porch steps with her arms wrapped around herself against the cold, and she turned when she heard the wagon, and something in her face when she looked up was undefended, the way a person looks when they are not expecting to be seen. I tied off the horse and unloaded the supplies, and did not say anything about it. But I thought about it later in the barn, and I recognized it as a specific thing. She had looked for a moment like someone who was home. I turned that over for a while, then I went in for supper. December brought the first serious cold, the deep cold of the Creole Range that moves in from the north and settles into the bones of a house the way it settles into your own bones, relentless and indifferent. I had weathered it every year of my life, and I knew its requirements. Extra wood, extra vigilance on the stock, the girls in heavier coats, which Cora had anticipated and already arranged. We developed the rhythms of a winter household, the four of us. Morning coffee before first light, when it was still only Cora and me in the kitchen, the girls not yet down, she at the stove, me at the table with the days list, the particular low quiet of a house before it wakes. It was in these mornings that we spoke most directly, and what we spoke about was practical. The state of the south fence, the price of flour, a letter from the county trustee confirming that the compact's condition had been formally noted as satisfied. I read that letter to her at the kitchen table on a Tuesday morning in December. She listened carefully, then she said, "So the north pasture is safe." "The north pasture is safe," I said. She nodded. She poured more coffee into my cup. I hadn't asked. She simply did it, and she said, "Good, that's what this was for." I looked at her. "Among other things," she added, and she said it matter-of-factly, not as a softening and not as a withdrawal, as a correction of a slightly incomplete statement. I said yes. "Among other things." We finished the morning coffee in the usual quiet, but something had shifted in the language of the thing, in the way two people note a fact that has become larger than either of them stated. The girls had not been confused about the arrangement the way Cora had feared, which I attributed entirely to the way Cora had handled it. She had told them in the early days that we were going to share a house with Mr. Guard, because it made good sense for everyone, and that Mr. Guard was a fair man and they were to be respectful and not a bother, and that their home was their own and safe. She had said nothing about love or family or permanence, because she was a woman who did not say things she could not stand behind. Willa had accepted this with the gravity of a 9-year-old who has learned that the world presents practical problems and practical solutions. June had accepted it, and then immediately set about constructing her own understanding of the situation, which by December had resulted in what I can only describe as a comprehensive annexation. It began with Combe. She was in the paddock with him every afternoon that wasn't too cold. She'd negotiated this with Cora in terms I wasn't present for but whose result I saw daily. By November's end she had learned to brush him correctly and was beginning to understand what he'd accept and what he wouldn't. She asked me questions while she worked. Real questions, the kind that require a real answer. By December, she had extended this same thorough attention to me. Not the nervous attention of a child trying to please an unfamiliar adult, the direct, interested attention of a child who has decided that you are worth knowing and is proceeding accordingly. She told me, one afternoon in the barn, that she had been worried about the move. "Were you?" I said. "Mama said it was good and practical," June said, working the brush in the long strokes I'd shown her. "But I didn't know if I'd like it." "Do you?" I said. She looked up at me with the direct look she always had. "I like it here," she said. "Do you like having us here?" I had not been asked that in those words. I looked at this 7-year-old with hay on her coat and the question sitting open in her face, and I said the honest thing. "I do," I said. She nodded, satisfied, as if this confirmed a conclusion she had already reached. "Good," she said, and went back to brushing. I stood there in the barn for a moment afterward, aware that something in me had settled, the way a loose board settles when you finally put the right nail in it. Something fitted. Willa came to me differently, with her careful reserve, her measuring quality, her preference for precision over warmth. She did not ask me easy questions. In December she asked me about the compact. She'd heard Cora mention it, and she wanted to understand what it meant and why it mattered. I explained it to her honestly. The acreage, my father's agreement, the trustee's decision, the condition. She listened without interruption, her hands folded on the kitchen table the way Cora's folded when she was thinking. "So we're here because of the north pasture," she said. "Partly," I said. She considered this, "and partly because Mama needed the roof." "Yes," I said. Willa was quiet for a moment. "Is that enough of a reason?" she said. I looked at her. It was not a challenge. It was a genuine question, delivered with the seriousness of a 9-year-old who has thought about it. "At the start," I said, "it was enough. Whether it stays enough is a different question." She seemed to accept this as an honest answer. She nodded, once, in the manner she had decisive. "I think you're a good person," she said, with the matter-of-fact quality of someone delivering a considered verdict. Then she got up and went back upstairs. I sat with that for a while, a 9-year-old's verdict. I found I wanted to be worthy of it. Christmas was not something I had observed with any ceremony for 7 years. The practicalities of a working ranch didn't stop for it, and I had been alone, and the occasion without anyone to observe it with is simply a day. I had told myself I did not mind and had believed it because there was nothing to compare it to. Cora made no announcement about Christmas. She simply, in the 2 weeks before, began doing things. She brought a cedar branch in from the yard and put it on the mantel in the front room. She made molasses cookies with the girls on a Saturday afternoon while I was in the barn, and when I came in the kitchen smelled of them, and June appeared immediately with one in each hand, one for herself, and one held out to me with the gravity of a high diplomat presenting credentials. I took the cookie. "Thank you," I said. "Mama says they're best warm," June said. "She's right," I said. June went back to the kitchen, satisfied with this transaction. I stood in the front room and looked at the cedar branch on the mantel and the small everyday fact of it, that someone had brought it in, that the house smelled of baking, that a 7-year-old had run out of the kitchen to bring me something warm, and I thought about 7 Christmases spent in a house that smelled of nothing but the cold. I went to the kitchen. Cora was at the stove, her back to me. The girls were at the table with the remaining cookies on a cloth. "Is there something I can do?" I said. She turned. She looked at me for a moment, reading the question. "There's wood needed for the front room fireplace," she said, "if you want to bring some in." "I'll do that," I said. I brought in the wood. I built up the front room fire and we spent that evening there, all 4 of us, which was unusual. We generally kept to the kitchen in winter for warmth. But the front room was warm and Cora had lit the lamp and June sat on the rug with her shoes off and told me about the school's Christmas recitation, which she had a part in and was preparing for with great energy and some nervousness. "What's the line?" I said. She told me. It was a short verse, straightforward, well within her. "You know it," I said. "What if I forget in front of everyone?" she said. "You won't," I said. "But if you do, you look out at the room, you find one face that looks kind, and you start again." June thought about this. "What if no one looks kind?" "Then you look at your mother," I said. June looked at Cora. Cora was watching me. Something in her face was open in a way it had not been in October, the way a house is more itself with the windows uncovered. "That's a good plan," June said. We sat by the fire until the girls went up to bed. Cora stayed a few minutes longer, the way she sometimes did now, the 2 of us in the quiet at the end of a day. I put another log on and she watched the fire. "The cookie was good," I said. "June was very particular about the amount of molasses," she said. "She has opinions," I said. "She has always had opinions," Cora said, and the way she said it, the warmth in it, the completeness of it, the 23 flavors of her whole understanding of that child, made something in my chest go still in a specific way. I looked at the fire. "She asked me in November if I liked having you here," I said. Cora was quiet. "I told her the truth," I said. Cora's hands were in her lap. She turned to look at me. Her face was steady as it always was, but the steadiness was not the managed steadiness of October. It was something more natural. "I've noticed that you tell the truth," she said. "Easiest to keep track of," I said. Something passed over her face that was not quite a smile but was near one. She stood and said good night, and I said good night, and she went upstairs. I sat by the fire for a while, aware that I was not going to be able to maintain the position I had started out with, that this was a business arrangement, and I had no expectations, and all I needed was the compact satisfied. That position had been accurate in October. It was not accurate anymore, and I was a man who kept his accounts honest, and the account of what this house was, and what these people were to me needed to be corrected. I was not sure what to do about it. I was not a man who had ever been uncertain about the management of his land or his stock or his fences. I was, it turned out, considerably less certain about this. I went to bed. The house was quiet. Somewhere above me the girls were asleep in the room that had been empty for 7 years. Cora was across the hall in a room I had walked past without purpose for 7 years. The cedar branch was on the mantel. The kitchen smelled, still faintly, of molasses. I had gotten used to the house full of people. I did not know when it had happened, but it had, and it was not a thing I wanted to undo. Christmas passed warmly. June performed her recitation at the school and did not forget her line and found Cora's face and delivered the verse clearly. Willa gave me, on Christmas morning, a small wooden carving she had made at school, a rough horse, recognizably combed, with careful attention given to the ears. I set it on my windowsill. It is there still. January arrived and tightened. The deep cold settled in the way it does, and we ran the house against it, the fire banks, the morning breaking of the stock trough, the management of supplies. There was an ease in the house that had not been in October, a low-grade comfort of people who know each other's rhythms and have made room for them. I knew that Cora woke before the girls and had the kitchen going by the time I came in from the barn check, and she knew that I came in from the south pasture before noon on Tuesdays and would want coffee. These were not spoken agreements. They were the accumulation of months of paying attention to each other, and they had the character of something permanent even though we had not said so. The word permanent sat in my mind in January, and I did not dismiss it. One evening in mid-January, after the girls were in bed, Cora told me she had received a letter from her sister in Caldwell. Her sister had inquired whether Cora intended to remain in Holt's Bench permanently, and whether the arrangement, her sister's word, which Cora quoted without inflection, was likely to continue. "What did you write back?" I asked. Cora folded her hands on the table. "I told her I hadn't determined the long term," she said. She looked at me directly. "That was accurate in November. I'm less certain it's accurate now." I looked at her. The kitchen was warm. The lamp was steady. "What would make it more accurate?" I said. She was quiet for a moment. She had the quality when she thought of complete stillness, nothing wasted, nothing performed. "An honest conversation," she said, "about whether this is still an arrangement or whether it's something else." I looked at my hands, then I looked at her. "I knew what I wanted from this in October," I said. "The north pasture, a condition met. I did not expect anything beyond the practical." I paused. "That has changed." "Has it?" she said. It was not a question. It was a quiet receipt of information. "The house is different," I said. "You know it is. The girls are—" I stopped. I am not a man of many words, and I was running up against the edge of the ones I had. "Willa told me she thinks I'm a good person," I said. "I've been trying to be worthy of that." Cora's face was doing nothing dramatic. No tears, no performance. But it was open in the way it had been by the front room fire, and I understood that open was what Cora looked like when she was telling the truth with her face. "They love it here," she said. "They've loved it for months." "And you," I said. I said it straight, the way she'd said I should conduct this arrangement directly, with no ambiguity. She was quiet for a long moment, not the quiet of hesitation, the quiet of a woman who is going to say something true and is making sure she has the right words. "I came here in October," she said, "because I needed to, and because the terms were fair, and because you seemed like a man who would do what he said." She looked at me. "Every one of those things has held, and something has been added to it that wasn't in the terms." She paused. "I find I don't want to leave." "Then don't," I said. She looked at me for a moment. Then she said simply, "All right." I had not said anything about love. She had not said anything about love. But the word was in the room, in the lamplight and the winter quiet, in the fact that we had just said the thing that was true and both of us knew it. "I should write to my sister," she said, after a moment, the wryness back in her voice, light and sure. "You should," I said. "Tell her the arrangement is continuing." The wryness arrived fully in her face, not a smile exactly, but the thing that lives next to a smile in a woman who has learned to hold things close. "I'll tell her it's permanent," she said. "That would be more accurate," I said. She stood and poured the last of the coffee into my cup. She always did this, I had noticed, the small automatic consideration of it, and she said good night and went upstairs. I sat with the coffee and the last of the warmth and thought, here is the thing about getting used to something. You do it in increments, and at no single moment can you point to the change, but at some point the thing you have gotten used to is necessary. Not comfortable, not convenient, necessary. The coffee in the morning, the cedar branch on the mantel, Willa's measured voice, June's opinions, the sound of a house that is not empty. Cora's face in the lamplight, undefended. That last one, that was where it had arrived. February, then March. The world softened by degrees the way the Crail Range lets go of winter, reluctantly, unevenly, the south-facing slopes opening before the north ones, the creek edges going soft while the high ground held. I had watched this every year of my life, and it was still good to see. We filed the appropriate paperwork with the county clerk in March. The formal record of the compact conditions satisfied. The guard place registered under the household as constituted. Orville Pratt shook my hand with a warmth that suggested he knew more about the nature of the household than the paperwork strictly indicated, and I let him. Spring came. Cora put in a kitchen garden along the east edge of the north pasture, which was a thing I had not asked her to do and which she had not announced. I came across her doing it on a Saturday morning in April, the girls helping with the varying effectiveness of children, and I stopped at the fence and watched. She looked up and saw me watching. "Rhubarb," she said, holding up a root crown. "It'll take a season to establish." "It does," I said. "But it comes back every year after," she said. I looked at the root in her hand, and the turned earth, and the girls kneeling in the spring mud, and the north pasture stretching away behind all of it. 800 acres of my father's work and mine, intact in the light. "It does," I said. She planted it. I watched. Then I opened the gate and went in and took the next section of ground that needed turning and got to work alongside them. And June immediately began explaining to me the correct depth for what she had decided to plant, which was based on research she had conducted with Willa and a seed catalog she had studied with the thoroughness of a land surveyor. I listened, I took instruction, I turned the earth. That summer the guard place had a garden that was the equal of any in Holt's Bench, and Cora's laundress operation was running from the south building the way I had suggested in October, and Willa was reading at a level that had her teacher suggesting she had outpaced the current curriculum, and June had been formally granted custody of Combs' morning brush routine, a thing he had accepted with the resignation of a horse who knows when a battle is lost. And in the evenings, when the work was done and the girls were in bed and the house was quiet in the way of a house that will be full again tomorrow, Cora and I sat at the kitchen table in the last of the day and talked, or didn't talk, and either was fine. This is the thing I would tell a man if he asked. A house has a weight to it when it's lived in correctly. Not heavy, settled. You feel it in the floors, in the way a door fits its frame, in the sound of it in the morning. My father's house had that weight for the 20 years my parents lived in it. It had it for 18 years of my marriage to Margaret. And then it had been light for 7 years, the way a place goes light when the people have gone out of it. Cora brought that weight back. Her daughters brought it back. Not because they filled a space I'd marked out for them, but because weight is not something you plan. It's something that accumulates when the right people stay. I had gone to her door in October with a piece of paper and a practical problem. She had come to my house with 2 trunks and a requirement of honesty. Between the practical problem and the honest requirement, the 2 of us and her girls had built something that neither of us had been looking for, and neither of us could now imagine being without. She planted rhubarb in my north pasture in April, and by the end of summer the crowns had taken. They would come back every year from now on, the way rhubarb does, without asking permission, without requiring much, simply present in the spring as a fact of the ground. That seemed right to me. That seemed like exactly the right shape for a thing built the way we built it. Quietly, practically, a little stubbornly, one ordinary day at a time, until we woke up one morning and it was simply the truth of where we lived and who we were to each other. And it was enough, more than enough. It was the whole thing.